Hi, welcome to the Online Jewelry Academy. I'm Professor John Ahr and I'm your instructor. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make this, a reverse setting for an unusual stone or other piece of material that you want to turn into a great wearable. Now, this is an idea that I came up with a few years ago, and it's achieved through the lost wax casting process. So what it is really is if you have an unusual shaped stone like I do here, or something unusual like a crystal or even like a rubber ball, you could turn it into a wearable without having to make it into a ring or earring where it might be clumsy to mount or it's just not that wearable. The secret behind it is that I'm securing the piece using prongs. So it's a reverse prong setting. The prongs hold the piece in place so that it's visible through the window cut out of the front. If you look at this piece, you'll notice that it has a really heavy texture on the border around the stone. Now, I didn't create that texture. That was natural to the wax. It's the saw marks from where the wax slab was cut at the factory. And you'll notice that it has kind of an unusual way of securing it with a double chain effect. Now, I got this idea from looking at Instagram, and I owe @HeartVariations a thank you for inspiring me with an unusual way of making a cool connection. You can find the Online Jewelry Academy on Instagram at @Jewelry Academy. Now, this piece, like I said, it's done through the lost wax casting process. So let's look over here and I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a simplified version. In other words, rather than taking an unusual shape or funny cut piece of material, I'm just going to work with this simple circular glass lozenge shape. And I've got here a 1/8 inch thick piece of blue Filawax. So the first thing that I would want to do with this is I would want to take the material that I want to set and put it on top of my wax. Next, I would take some other type of tools. In this case, I've got just a metal ruler and a needle stuck in a handle. And what I would do is make a marking on this wax surface so that I would know where to cut. Now, you can fill in that little mark that you make with talcum powder so that it has a high contrast, so you'll be able to follow it more carefully. And I would use a regular saw blade. Don't use the wax saw blades that you can with wax like this. Just use a regular one for metal so that you can cut a really straight line. That way you're not wasting wax and having to do too much filing. So once I cut that piece out, I'm going to end up with a square like this one. And you can see that it offers me enough room to create an interesting border around this piece. Next, if I want to remove those saw lines from that surface, I would use my wax file. And the wax file, remember, it has two sides to it. It's got a coarse side and a finer side. And if you just allow the weight of the file to hit the top surface of the wax, you can quickly smooth it down so that it's almost completely smooth. And then what I would do using templates is I would mark my cardinal points and I would put an outside border and an inside ring that would allow me to cut a window so that the piece won't fall through. So you can see when I put the disc on top of the wax, it completely hides that window. So there's a bit of overlap. So once I cut it out, I'm going to end up with something that looks like this. So you can see that I still have the same border and a window that if I put this back on top, see, it doesn't fall in. So it's small enough that it's just going to create that window without having the difficulty of figuring out how to trap that piece. The next step is to take something either like your flex shaft motor with grinders or grinding tools like this. These are wax burrs, so they're designed to cut wax very quickly. And you could also use perhaps the back end of your Exacto knife. Now, a trick that I like to use with this is I'll take a honing stone and I'll actually sharpen the back end. And what I can do is I can then hollow back the piece. So every time that you see a little bit of wax falling away from your piece, think of it as pennies, nickels, and dimes just jumping off of the piece, making it cheaper for you to produce. So now you can see that I've got it nicely hollowed back, and it's very, very even in its thickness, which is important in casting. And if I put my lozenge back inside of it, you can see it's not falling through. So I've maintained that dimension of the window. Now the next thing that I need to do is I need to apply a group of wax jump rings. And I've made these from just ordinary square wax wire. Now, the way to do this is you need to determine what size hole you're going to need to accommodate the chain that you intend to wear this on. And when you find an armature that's suitable, you can just warm up your wax wires in a warm bowl of water and then just coil them the way that you would coil a wire around a mandrel. Once you've created a nice coil, just heat up your Exacto blade and cut a straight line, just like you would saw through your wire to create jump rings. Once you have all of your jump rings ready to go, what you can do is you can use your cardinal points to determine where to place them. So in this case, I would probably start with at least the bottom three. And the way that you're going to apply them is you're going to use some blue inlay wax. And I showed this to you in a previous video on the additive process to make that beautiful urchin looking cast in place piece. And what I do is I use a wax tool. This is basically just a handle with a needle inserted into it, and it's given a little bit of bend to it, and the eye is clipped off. And I'm going to heat my heat source, which is my alcohol lamp. You could use any type of heat source. I'm just old school. And I want to put on my glasses to protect my eyes, number one, and number two, so I can see a little bit better. And all you're going to do is you're going to close these jump rings the same way that you would wire jump rings. They're kind of open like this now. I just want to bring the two ends together so that they meet, and I will wax that seam shut as I wax the loop to the frame. So what you're going to do is you're just going to take a wax ring, close it up, and find the position using your cardinal point, and then just hold it in that position, and you just want to tack it down at first. So all I'll do is I'll heat my wax tool and take it to my blue inlay, get a little bit of wax on the tool, and then just heat it back up again so that the wax will move along the tool. You might be able to see that a little bit. And then I'm just going to come and tack that wax down. Now it's going to hold, and it caught my thumb too, but there we go. So we've got that little jump ring on there. So I'm going to add about 6 of them. So let me add my jump rings, and I'll come back and show you the results. Okay, I've successfully added the jump rings to my piece, and now it has sort of a really cool look to it. The chain will pass underneath the piece. It kind of gives it sort of a nautical look. Now, the thing that I think is interesting about it is that the lozenge shape itself has a radial composition to it. In other words, all of the little flowers extend outward from that center orange flower, and the jump rings that I've added sort of have that radial effect to it too. So what I'd like to do is just continue that look on the top surface of this border. And the way that I've decided to do that is to just add it with a melted texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my wax tool, and I'm just going to continue that surface all the way around. It's really easy. What I need to bear in mind, though, is that every line that I'm going to create with the wax tool has to point towards the center of the piece. So the way you do this is you just warm up your tool, and that's just burning off the excess wax, which is a good thing. And we just lay it quickly on that top surface. Just pat it. If it doesn't make the mark right away, you can always go back. Just watch out for the jump rings so that you don't come into contact with them. You don't want to disturb them. Now, when you do this, it may look a little bit messy or kind of gummy, but don't worry, it'll come out great in the casting. And once you polish it up, oh my gosh, it's probably going to take on a great appearance. So I've already done this, and let me show you how it turned out. Now, I cast my piece in sterling silver, and as you can see, the radial effect has a nice starburst appearance to it that will complement the radial composition of the stone. The only thing that I have left to do really is to solder prongs onto the reverse side in order to hold the lozenge shape. Why am I doing that? Well, cast pieces are often porous, and therefore cast wires can be porous and brittle, and they could break and the piece could fall out, and I don't want that to happen. So let me clear the decks and set up for soldering, and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, I've set things up for soldering, and you're probably wondering, what? Well, I'm using two 18-gauge wires to create my prongs. What I did was I created little arcs with the wires, and I filed the ends of them flat so they'd make good contact with the back side of my piece. Then I used my third hands to position them to hold them basically at cardinal points, and I've applied a healthy amount of paste solder and flux combined. Now, the reason why I added a healthy amount was because I know from experience that pieces that are cast are very porous, and they're going to just suck up a lot of solder. So I want to make sure that these wires attach. Now you'll notice that I have them pushed back towards the wall of the piece, a pretty far distance away from the opening. In other words, I didn't want to have to fuss with exactly where they needed to be. I left enough of the material to create a boundary that as long as I went to the outside of it, my prongs would be in the right position. So all I need to do now is to solder them. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is that I don't need to worry about the jump rings at all. Because they were cast as part of the piece, I don't need to worry about them falling off. All I need to do is make sure that I put an even heat to my piece. So I'm going to take advantage of the charcoal block and use the reflective heat properties that it gives me if I ignite the center of the block. This paste solder always kind of combusts and gives off a little bit of smoke, but it's not a problem. Remember to work with good ventilation. And remember, we have a video on how to create this ventilation system. There, I've got my 4 prongs soldered. Now I can take away my third hands. Success there. Be sure to quench your tool so that you don't get burned. And let's remove the second one. Perfect. Look at that. Now I can quench this piece. I'll just pick it up with my soldering pick. There we go. And you can see how I've got the wires secured at the cardinal points. And all I really need to do is pick up a pair of diagonal cutters, and I'll just cut them as long prongs at this point. And I can always recycle the wire. I'll just put it into my scrap bin. There we go. And you can see now I have 4 prongs on my piece. So let me pickle this and clean it up a bit, and then I'll come back and show you how to set the piece and apply the chain. Okay, I got the piece out of the pickle pot, and I've already threaded my chain through it just so I could make the video a little bit shorter. But let me show you how I'm going to set the piece into it. So I've got enough distance between my prongs and the lozenge shape, so I don't really need to worry about grinding anything or trying to get anything just perfectly in place. So what I can do now is just basically use my fingers to start to push the prongs down on top of the piece. Now, all I really want to do is just make a light contact with it. I can tighten it up with pliers or even my fingers probably towards the end, but at this initial point, what I'm trying to do is just get it set in place and figure out the centering of the element within the piece. So let me just push this last one over, and you can see it's held in place, but it's moving around. So what I can do is I can find the perfect center of it And while I'm looking at it from the top, I can just touch it on the back side and I get the prongs nice and centered. And then once you get it to a point where it's where you want it exactly, you can come back with your pliers and then just work the prongs at their base and tighten them up a little bit. And what that will do for you is it will create a nice tension on it. So you don't need to see me tighten everything up. It's in there good enough. Let me bring up a necker so you can see what it's going to look like. And I love the way that this piece hangs with the chain coming underneath it, just like that. So you can easily reverse set almost anything you want in a setting like this one. If you like this video, be sure to like it and share it. And if you haven't become a subscriber to the Online Jewelry Academy already, you can do so by clicking the button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And we have our complete playlist on onlinejewelryacademy.com at any time of day that you want to check it out. If you want to fund the production of a future Online Jewelry Academy video, you can do so by making a contribution through patreon.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.